Hello everyone, this is Paige from Mosaic Moments, and today I am showing you an advanced tutorial with the dynamic die set. For today's demo, I'm using the 4x4 die and the 2x4 die from the set, and I'm going to be using this layering die that creates diamond-shaped pieces, which I'm going to be cutting my photos with that one. So you definitely want to plan out your photographs before you get started. So I made sure for the photographs, the subjects could fit within that center space of the 4x4 die. Plus, I'm going to be cutting several photographs with this diamond-shaped die, so you want to make sure your subjects fit within the space as you like as well. So the reason why today's tutorial is going to be a bit more advanced is because I'm going to be showing you how to create this sort of panoramic look with the dynamic die. And you have to use a blending technique. I'll talk a little bit more about that later if you don't know what that is, but this is what we're going to be doing today. You can see in there that panorama kind of look in the outer edges there. All right, so let's get started. To use the dynamic dies, you will of course need a die machine. I have the Sizzix Big Shot Foldaway right here, and I'm putting my plates in as shown in the manufacturer's instructions, so check that before you start cutting with your dies. And here's the 4x4 dynamic die. I did put it in at an angle, which we always recommend in our videos, so that way the pressure can be distributed a little more evenly in the machine, and we find that you have a better cut when you put your dies in at an angle. All right, so I just rolled that through, and for this cut, you're going to save that frame piece that sits within the die itself. If it does get stuck, you can use a pair of tweezers. You can just get some crafting tweezers. And so I have the die here, and there's little holes in each corner that I can poke the tweezers through so I can get this die cut out. So this is what you need, is the frame piece, and we're going to be cutting that 4 times. Now I'm going to cut the 2x4 dynamic die, and I'm following the same directions again. I've just put the die in at an angle and place a piece of cardstock on top. Mainly you want to make sure that cardstock is a little bit bigger than the die itself, because you don't want to accidentally cut it a little bit too short. And this one actually came out really easily, and so I'm also going to cut this die 4 times. Once you have your frame pieces cut, you can start placing glue on the back of each piece. I'm using the Herma Dotto dispenser. It's my favorite repositionable glue because it lasts a very long time. I highly recommend it. And so I'm just placing the glue really carefully around each little corner and each edge of the die. You just want to make sure it'll stick down really well on your grid paper so it doesn't fall off later. I would be careful, these dies are very thin, so if you are gluing down, make sure you're careful to add the glue on it because it might tear or bend easier than some of our other dies. Alright, so once you put the glue down, and I did have a piece of cardstock there, so just so I wouldn't get glue on my paper or on the table. Alright, so now you're going to carefully, as always, place your die on the grid, on that top line and on the left side of wherever you're going to place it. So it might be easiest for you to just start in one corner, like this far left corner here. Might be a good place to start for you. And if needed, this is why the repositionable glue is handy, so you can pick it up, because sometimes you may not get it on the line quite as you like it. But the goal here is to make sure that top and left line that you're covering is completely covered up, or else it won't look straight, and you don't want the lines to show. All right, and you want to take your time if you need to. You can cut what I call base pieces, and to do that, you would cut dies. You get dies from the basic set, so in this case, you need the 4x4 die from set A and the 2x4 die in set B, and you can cut those backgrounds and glue the dynamic dies on top of them, and it'll make it sturdier, and it's easier to line them up on the grid paper usually that way. But I know some of you have said you don't want to waste more paper. I'm making a background because it gets covered up anyway. But if you're finding it frustrating to get these glued down on the grid paper properly, you may want to consider making those pieces with just some leftover cardstock you don't plan to use, or white cardstock that's a little bit cost effective. All right, so you will put the 2x4 right next to, pretty much in between each of the 4x4 dynamic dies. So I'm going to go ahead and place the 4x4 down in each corner, and the 2x4 dies are going in between all of these pieces. Just so you know, in case you're new, we do have another video about the dynamic die. It is a basic video on how to use this set, and I use pretty much all the dies that come in the set as well, so go check that out. I have a link on the top right corner here. You can click that to watch that video if you are not very familiar with this set. And if you have seen that video, you'll notice that today's pattern is different from a previous one, so this is a nice new pattern you can use for your layouts. All right, so in the end, you should have a pattern that looks like this one here. So next, I'm going to be cutting my main subject photographs. So these are usually photographs with portraits in them, which will be all of them today on my layout. This one has a portrait. I'm just going to keep this middle piece in the 4x4 dynamic die, so you don't have to worry about, because the size is too big for a 4x6 photograph, but that middle part does fit a 4x6 photograph really well. So I just put it through the machine, and you probably notice I have a crease pad rather than a plastic plate to avoid having those indents around the photograph. Next, I'm going to be cutting with this square die. Well, I'm actually going to turn it to make it a diamond shape, so make sure to cut it in the diamond direction, not the square direction. And this time I'm going to add washi tape on top because I'm a little bit worried that die may shift around or the photo may shift around in the machine, so the washi tape will keep it secure. Just make sure the washi tape's on the side that you don't want to keep on your layout in the end, because sometimes the tape does leave residue on the photograph. And again, I'm rolling it through the machine. It's a pretty easy cut. You just roll it through and you have your piece. So I'm going to be cutting 3 more photographs with that same die. And of course, next, it's really easy. All you have to do is glue the back of each photograph and place them within the die shapes. So here I'm just gluing the back of my square photographs here that'll fit within the 4x4 dynamic die cuts. As you can see, it's really easy and fits in there perfectly. All right, so I'm almost done with this last one here. And as you can see, these are great spots for when you want to add portraits. I do recommend being careful if you have close-up photographs. Make sure you don't cut into anyone's face. If someone's head, we'll say, is too big, you may want to use it for another project. The dynamic die is great because it does have some larger spaces to add portraits. As you can see in this case, a lot of mine, the people are a little bit farther away. I don't really like cutting into people's bodies as much as I can, but it also is great if you have a headshot that you want to put in. But again, just you want to make sure that you have subjects that'll crop the way you like them. All right, so I'm going to start getting into the advanced part here. So I'm going to make a panoramic look on the top part of my layout here with these photographs. These are actually the same photograph, although the third one you see here was actually a mirrored version of the first one. So you can do that in a lot of different photo programs on your computer. So I have my 3 photos here, and it's not going to be a traditional panorama. I don't have 3 different photographs that go across that layout, right? But it's going to look like a panorama when we're done. All right, I'm going to be using this corner die. I guess we'll call it an arrow die, corner die. It comes in the dynamic die set, and you can see it's the same shape. And I can't really, since we're using 4x6 photographs, I can't really use the 4x4 one very easily, so I'm going to use this little triangular arrow one here. And I do recommend washi tape. I put it right in the top left corner of my photograph here. I think it's easiest to start in a corner. And basically the goal here, and this is why this tutorial is a bit more advanced, is because you have to place that little corner die in different places of your photographs to make it look like a panorama. Now the nice thing is these will be spaced out, so it does not have to be perfect. All right, so I'm going to put this the same piece on the opposite side of my photograph. And in the end, it'll have the same horizon line. Those trees are in a line, the sky's in a certain line, right? So basically, your goal is to try to get a similar horizon line going on your whole page. Well, on the on the top half in this case, not the entire thing altogether. Anyway, now roll it through. So what's nice is that it does not have to be perfect because there's little spaces in between each of these cuts on the dynamic die. All right, so look at the top two that I just did there. It kind of looks like it's a panorama, right? Even though I didn't cut those shapes right next to each other. All right, next it's going to be a little tricky because you can see there's not enough space to put this one and the corner below it. So I kind of squeezed it right next to the first one as best as I can. And what's nice, it has the water in there, so it's really easy to blend that when I make my next piece. So this is the blending technique. The blending technique is generally used with, if you've ever done a mosaic with the Mosaic Moment system, that's the 1x1 inch squares, and we only use 4x6 photographs for our mosaics. And basically what we do is it's multiple photographs, but it's blended to look as if it's one photo, even though there is several different photos used on a layout. It's a really cool look. I recommend going to the pattern gallery and looking at the mosaic category, and you'll see some of these blending techniques there. And we do have an article, I'll put it below in the description so you can, where we have examples using the blended technique with mosaics, so you can get a better idea of how the blending technique is used. But that's the idea here, is you're cutting your photographs in a way that makes it looks like one blended or one panorama photograph that's going across your page, even though you actually use multiple photographs. So again, here I made sure I got a bit of that water, and there is a little bit of the rock, but that's okay. And again, now that part looks like one big photograph, even though, as you saw, I didn't even have to cut it exact, I didn't have to cut it at an exact way. I just made sure I cut pieces to make it look like in the end, it looks like one photograph. And that's the magic of mosaic moments. All right, so now I have the 2x4 die, and I had to get a second photograph. I tried to see if this space would fit on my previous photograph, but it didn't look like it was going to work out too well. So anyway, so I would recommend getting 2 or maybe actually really 3 photographs to do this panoramic look. And I'm going to try to get it as best as possible. I know in the other ones it shows a lot of the sky and it shows some water in the photos. So again, you just do the best you can and find the spots that'll look the best with whatever pieces you put on your 4x4 dynamic dies. All right, and I do again recommend washi tape to make sure your photos don't shift around or they look crooked when you put them on your page. All right. And I forgot to mention before, I did use a pair of scissors to basically cut the photograph in half because the photo wasn't long enough to stretch between the 2 pieces I needed. So you can always cut your photographs the way you need to make sure you get the shapes. And now I can put these on my dynamic layout. Look at that. All right. So I have these 2 now, and again, it's going to look like it's a continuing panoramic look. All right, I sped the video up here because I think you get the idea, but for the last photograph, I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the first photograph. I'm pretty much putting this in the first one I put in the top left corner again. This one, to make it a little bit different, I scooted that second arrow I just did a little bit over to the left more, not right in the corner. So you don't always have to go right in the corner. Basically, as I said, really the idea is to try to find the spots in the photograph you think will blend well, so it'll look like one big photograph in the end. So that could be various different spots on your page. And with this last one, I'm able to get it close to right to that next corner on the right corner. All right, so I have that done. And now this top portion of the top panorama here looks complete, and I like how it all lines up. And again, this is using the blended technique, and that's what's cool about it is I use multiple photographs to make it look like one big photo. All right, so obviously after you get all your pieces cut, you can go ahead and glue them on your grid paper, or glue each piece on your grid paper. For me, it's easier to just put the glue directly on the grid paper itself rather than trying to get the glue on each little piece here. They are pretty small, so be careful to not bend them if you try to glue on the back of each of these little pieces here, especially on the 2x4 die. They have that very thin part in the center of the cuts here that could easily bend, so be careful with these pieces. All right, so I really like this panoramic look, and if you go on a trip and you forgot to take, because we tell people take multiple shots in a row to get the panoramic look right, but this is a great opportunity if you forgot to do that, but you still want to get the panoramic look. This is definitely a neat technique to go with, especially with the dynamic die, because the dynamic die, you can see here, there's some gaps, so it doesn't have to look perfect, and no one will know any different. Everyone's going to think it looks like one big photograph you used here, and you're going to secretly know you actually used 2 or 3 of that same photograph over and over again. So that is what's neat about the blending technique. Now I'm going to show you how to do the same panoramic look in this middle space, and I actually think this will be easier than when we use the 4x4 dynamic die. And to fill the middle, I am just going to use the 2x2 die from set A to do that. All right, so first you want to take the photograph you want to use and place the 2x4 die on top. And I'm going to cut this one. Now you could leave it exactly as I have it, but I'm cutting it because I actually want to use part of the photograph for the 2x2 die. So that way I don't have to use 3 photographs. I'm only going to need 2 photographs to fill in this space. So cutting it, you still want it the horizon line, if there is one, to line up correctly. All right, so I'm just picking a good spot. I want a little bit of the trees in there, and I want a little bit of the water in my photograph too. So I'm going to try to line it up as best I can on the other side here. And like I said, because it's going to be spaced out so far anyway, it doesn't have to be exact or perfect. You just kind of need to eyeball where you think it should go, and in the end, it'll still look good. Because as I said, it's going to be spaced that far apart anyway. All right, and then next I'm going to take my 2x2 die and carefully again place it. You can kind of line it up with the other die because it's also 2 inches tall, and kind of eyeball where you need it to go. All right, and the nice thing is I can cut these dies at the same time, and I do recommend washi tape again for these dies so your photos and your dies don't slip around in the machine and then you're disappointed and have to reprint your photograph. We don't want that for you. Okay, and of course I just take the pieces I need. The 2x2 die is pretty straightforward, and with the 2x4 dynamic die, I just take those 2 little pieces out. And now I have the pieces to fill in these spaces here. And as you can see, it lines up and looks like a nice panorama here. Okay, and of course I need to get my last piece in on that second 2x4 dynamic die. I'm going to clean up here. Okay, so this is actually a second photograph. These were kind of panoramic photographs. They were taken right next to each other, so you can totally use photographs that make a panoramic scene if you blend them all together. So I'm just taking my previous photograph. I kept the edge of it here, and I'm going to line up the next 2x4 photograph as best I can. And this time I'm not going to worry about cutting the photograph in half because I'm not going to be sharing this photograph with any other die. So I get to keep it this way. All right, I'm going to roll it through the machine here. And it's straightforward from here. Basically, when I get it cut all the way through, I'm going to save those 2 pieces on the outer edge. And of course, to finish the center part of this layout, I need to glue down each piece. Again, I'm just gluing down directly on the grid paper because I find that easier than gluing on the back of the small pieces. Of course, with this 2x2 one, I'm just gluing on the back of the photograph here. All right, so that's easy to place down on the grid lines here. I needed to readjust it a little bit. And I'm going to place this last photograph down on these 2 edges here. Just got to get those glued down. And now kind of stuck to my die, so I decided to bring it into this layout. All right, so now I have these 2, and that center part is done, although I'm going to add, this is a die from the Graphic Shapes 2 set. And I thought it was nice to use with a dynamic die because it has that diamond look. So now it's completely finished in that center part. So the dynamic die set comes with this little tiny die that makes 4 little triangles, and that'll fill in the rest of the space. And with the 4x4 dynamic die, there's these little triangles that need to be filled in. So this die is great because you can make those little triangles really quickly. Here I just use pattern paper, and then I put them in the Xyron Create-a-Sticker machine, which is really nice for those smaller cuts. And now I'm just gonna, since they're now sticky on the back, I can just place them right into those little triangle spaces around the layout. So I got 4 down, and I made some more to fill in the rest of these little spaces here. I picked orange because the outline of the dynamic dies are blue, and I thought this would stand out a little more. And I also made these triangle pieces with the Graphic Shapes die that I used, and that way it'll pull the page together and make that center part stand out a little more. So that's why I added those there. All right, we reached the end of the demo. This was, as you can see, it's a little more of a complex layout. I did finish that bottom one with using the same directions as I did at the top. I just used a different photograph so you can see a bit more of the sky in that bottom panorama there. All right, so if you have any questions, I know there's a lot of information in this video, so if you do have any questions about it or if I missed anything, please let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe so you can be updated on future tutorials. All right, I hope you had fun today, and I'll see you next time.